Wes and Ted's Excellent Conversation, a podcast about teaching, learning, and anything else that pops into Wes and Ted's heads.
And then my audition is...
Have a less unpleasant day.
Keep singing that song. I want to hear the rest of that song. And then I want to hear the origin of that song too.
I'm just sitting here I was just talking about, like, I'm just not having a good day. And it was just, well, this will, and I said, this recording will make my day somewhat less unpleasant. And that's nice. And it was like,
gosh, I
wow,
hope so.
That's some strong say, have a less unpleasant day. That's the.
Oh, okay. Now I got less unpleasant. I got you.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. That's the little, what do you call that? That's the jingle that will never be, right?
The jingle.
Yes.
Is it like, is what made your day unpleasant thus far? Is it worth sharing? Is it fun to share? Or
no, I think it's totally on point, actually. So today, what we're supposed to be talking about, I don't know how you're going to figure out where to start this. good times.
I think it's already started.
Yeah, it seems fair. So the title of today's episode, we decided, we'll see what happens after we're done talking, but it was supposed to be process. What do you do? What was our subtitle here? What do you tell yourself to get stuff done? And I think for me, a big... Oh boy, I guess I'm just going to out myself as a guy who studied computer science right from the outset.
You can't hide it anyway. Even if you wanted to, you can't hide it. So just go
no, it's totally true. It's totally true. So, would you turn on Do Not Disturb mode on your side, by the way, because we're getting a lot of plings and blings and beeps and.
I'm already. In fact, it's already on.
Oh, okay, that's great. And in fact, that'll tie into what we're talking about too. But as a computer science guy, there's a part of my brain that wants to treat myself like a computer. It's like, well, I'll promise myself that I'll do this thing, and then the thing will get done. In the same way that if I write the program, the computer will do the thing, right? What could possibly go wrong? That'll be great.
That's an amazing lead question. We should probably introduce ourselves real quick, just so we're not. Yeah, I mean, sure. Anyway, that's Wes Carroll. Mm-hmm. WesCarroll.com. 2 R's, 2 L's. Mm-hmm. A math expert, also a conversation expert, which is why we're doing this podcast.
I trained for many years to know.
Yeah, I mean, your entire life, really,
Great. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. Just because you've done something your entire life doesn't mean you're good at it. Just ask anyone I play bridge with.
Real quick on that point. Sorry,
totally.
Real quick. I was reading Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse.
Sure. As one does.
Interesting guy, and he's so dark. But anyway, he made the point that with even a modest amount of talent, enough time will make anyone an expert. So basically, you don't have to be that great at it out of the gates. If you have some talent, you'll become great at it over time. Well,
if you love it and you practice in a smart way. Exactly. But sure, yeah, no, I'll buy that.
That's true.
Well-spoken Ted Dorsey of tutorted.com. Let's see now. What can I say about you that I haven't said in previous? May I just repeat the old stuff? You are a tutor par excellence. You are a coach, mentor,
guide.
Guide. I like guide, actually. That's really good. You guide students into doing as well on the ACT or SAT as it is conceivable for them to do. And I think that's a really important service to put out in the world. The idea of, look, you know some stuff, you can learn some stuff, you have some capabilities. This test is meant to test your capabilities, and there are a lot of ways to do it wrong. And if you really do it in the right way, you learn the fundamental new stuff, learn some new skills, approach it in a new way, then the test will correctly show that you have a great deal of potential. Whereas without that expert guidance, there are a lot of ways that can go wrong, and the test can turn in a lower score than perhaps would have been possible for you.
That's great. I like that. I also like the idea of the goal not necessarily. I mean, the goal is the higher score, but like the path to getting there is not specifically about just that. You know what I mean? It's basically about like awakening your, the best vision of yourself and your own knowledge, and like sort of like enabling you to apply the knowledge even that you already have effectively, because that totally is what I do. And I mean, I think it's weird how, eventually we worry about the score, but we don't start there at all.
Well, I think some people think of it as like, oh gosh, I'm at this score and I want to get to that score, independent of how can I say this? I am however good I am, and I was able to get that score and I'd like to get this score. And I always invert that and say, no, the test accurately shows how good you are. And if your score goes up, it's not because we gamed the system, it's because we made you better.
Yeah. That's nice.
Yeah, I do believe that. I'm not claiming that the SAT and the ACT are perfect instruments by any means. But they're not bad.
They tell you what they tell you. Yeah,
they tell you what they tell you, and they measure it pretty consistently, and we can make people. You can make people better at that bucket of skills. And for my money, particularly at the high end of the score range, it's measuring something that's going to get tested later on. It's measuring, it's not measuring what it claims to measure, but it's measuring something important, right? Patience, meticulousness, the quality of your study habits, your grit. Right. There's a bunch of stuff that goes into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Real quick, I was going to show you this earlier when you're introducing me. It's like, I need to reveal the Tutor Ted books that I've like totally staged over
author
my
of 174. You've got them in the shot.
I do, but my
nice.
shoulder's blocking them. So I was like, I've got to
you got to kind of pivot a little bit.
Yeah, it's totally, it's so staged. It's like, oh, oops, I just happened to have left
look
these
at that. It's a pile of books. And Ted, who wrote those fine looking tomes on your shelf? I must ask. So it's funny too, because I'm figuring probably 80% of the people listening to us are not watching us at the same time. We originally decided we'd do like a YouTube thing, but we're actually just a podcast at this point.
That's funny. That's a good point.
Let me just tell you, these books are good looking books. And in fact,
I will agree on, because I did not design them, but I do agree that they're very good looking.
I've read several of your books, and they are all of unimpeachably high quality. Did I just say the wrong thing? Did I get it backwards? Shoot.
No.
Too many negative.
You cannot impeach their quality. That is correct.
Excellent. They are unimpeachable. Well done. Okay, good. Thank goodness. That's why you're the SAT guy. See, you know this stuff. Let's talk about process.
Yeah. I mean, I love that the question that you proposed, or like the kind of like the task that you're hoping to like accomplish for yourself is basically like, can I be a computer? You know what I mean? Can I basically write a program for myself? Because that is approach. You know what I mean? Like a program is one kind of approach, basically, where it basically, if you know how it works and you've tested it, then it'll work, ad infinitum.
Sure.
So number one, is that possible? Can you write kind of a script?
Certainly not. In fact, it's not even possible on a computer. Like the whole thing that rests on, right, is the notion that the computer you programmed yesterday is the same computer that's going to run the program today.
This stuff's fascinating to me, by the way, because I was just thinking about this and thinking about like bugs, and it's like, really, bugs? I've got a friend who has a fancy friend, very, very fine person, who also happens to be fancy, who has a Land Rover, and the Land Rover has this like crazy computer built in, and the computer at times bugs out, right? And it's like, how, you know what I mean? Like, why this car should not have this problem? But tell me more. Like, I don't understand programming bugs as well as I should, because I have not written enough programs, apparently.
Well, this will be great, because I have a computer science degree from MIT, and therefore some percentage of the people listening will say, oh, yes, he knows what he's talking about. Whereas the actual programmers in the audience will be like, that is complete BS. This guy doesn't know what he's... So let's see where I fall on that scale, right?
Share your opinion regardless.
Exactly. That's what we're all about here at Wes and Ted's Excellent Conversation, right? So whenever you make anything, right, there's going to be an error rate associated with it, right? You can't make a perfect thing.
Agreed. Happens with books.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like, for every 100 pages, there's a certain number of typos, right? And your editor is going to catch some percentage of them, and like, whatever, right?
And even that process won't be perfect. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so what it comes down to is, obviously, if you're more skilled, maybe that error rate is lower, but 0 is an unreasonable target. So the notion here is, okay, the more complex your system, right, the more errors, the larger the number of errors, because the percentage is the same, more or less. Okay. Right, maybe the percentage goes up as the complexity increases. I don't know about that, but there's going to be some number of errors, and there's normally like this, bug finding and fixing process, which is not intended to bring the number of bugs to 0. It's intended to surface the ones that really, really matter, so you can fix those. And then what do you have? You have a system that has a certain percentage of errors in it, where of those errors, the most severe ones have been found and fixed. And it's like, okay, if you've gone through that process, then you probably have a system that does something imperfectly, but it's better than not having the system. And that's kind of that's the promise of computer programming, right? Is you wind up with software that is better than not having the software. Mm-hmm. And anything beyond that, for my money, is sort of icing on the cake, right? Something that works perfectly is like, that's never the goal. Just something that's better than not having the thing. Okay, that's great.
Real quick about bugs. My
Sure.
farmer landlord. I asked my farmer landlord.
You're going to segue to actual insects here, aren't you?
No,
Oh, all right.
God, that'd be cleverer than what I
I'm
was
just
doing.
saying. All right, go.
No, I asked him, what is a weed? What's the definition of a weed? And he
A plant
said,
you don't want?
exactly, any plant that you don't want. He's like, so
Yeah.
therefore, a tomato plant can be a weed if it's in
Sure.
the wrong place or if it's annoying to you or whatever.
Makes
So
sense.
is that what a bug is as well? Is a bug just like something something that is happening that's not what you want to have happen?
Well, yeah, I mean, one way to define bug is something that the thing is not supposed to do, but a better way to define it is something that the user doesn't want, which is why, there's this old, not really very funny joke in computer science of, oh, that's not a bug, it's a feature, right? Like it
Right.
doesn't do the thing you expect, but it does the thing that I, the programmer, intended. And it's like, all right, well, we can go round and round with that. But increasingly, right, computer systems are getting more complex, and therefore, more bugs are being introduced, more features are trying to be introduced. What it really means is the rate at which they are changing is increasing, right? So, and that can be like you get more updates per year on your computer. And it could also just mean that every time you get an update, there are more pieces that are changing, right? But one way or the other, the fact is that the computer you wrote the program for increasingly is not the computer that's running the program some months later. And, often that's no big deal, but like, it becomes an issue. So
you're talking about like operating system changes?
Yeah, for example.
Yeah, okay.
Sure, that's one example, right? But like, I had a programmable calculator back in the day. Like the programs that I wrote for that programmable calculator, if the calculator still runs, the programs still run because the thing was just so underpowered and there weren't software updates. It's like you bought the calculator and you got the thing, right?
Right.
Increasingly, right, there are all these, we're dealing with a dynamic system. Well, what's the ultimate dynamic system from that perspective? Your brain, right? Like your brain is not, it's not getting system updates in the sense of somebody wiring, sending, code to your brain, but you are constantly getting inputs from your environment. And they are things like things you think that change the shape of your software. Or, I'll say it more straightforwardly, right? You hear some opinion, you think about it, it changes your mind. And now, your mind is now different, right?
Well, and the funny thing too is that your mind can change within the course of a day based on emotion, based on there. Even just the time of day, I mean,
what you ate, whether you napped, like there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes in there, right? Yeah. So the notion of, I'll just promise myself I'll do it and then it'll get done. It's like, that's just hogwash. That's applying the wrong framework to the problem at hand. I mean, yes, there is some value to the idea of making yourself the promise that you will do this thing. There's also great value to the idea of, hey, I want to get this big project done. So what I will do today is break the project into bite-sized chunks. That's valuable. That'll still be valuable tomorrow.
Yeah, that's true. And that's a technique, but and it potentially will be valuable tomorrow, but it also might not be the right task for tomorrow either. You know what I mean? Like, you'll have to decide when and where that fits. I mean, I think metaphorically, the computer program, it doesn't bother me that much as like a technique to apply to the brain. You just have to study your own brain really carefully and then apply it at the right time and allow room for bugs and failure. So, basically it's like, well, here's one example that you and I have shared recently. So I have these playlists on Spotify that are 2-hour work playlists, right?
Yeah.
And so this is how my brain works. Don't know why, but this is how it is. And it only took me, 40 years to discover. It basically, I use nonverbal rhythmic music, with not a lot of melody to it actually. And I put those on and I work for 2 hours. And once I'm finished, I will have generally 2 hours worth of work, but sometimes like an hour and a half of really good work and then half an hour of like exhaustion. It just depends on the day. I'm, I don't always get to the end of the 2 hours having been successful the entire time, but I often do. Right. And I always get to an hour and a half of good stuff. And then that's my kind of my work period for the day. So
Let's break that apart a little bit, because I think there's a lot of good stuff. So first of all, let me just acknowledge, right, that when you first told me this 9 months ago, I practically twisted your arm into sharing your Spotify playlist with me. And I have played your 2-hour playlist any number of times since then. They work for me the same way they work for you. They're fantastic. And so let's think about what's going on there. My mental model of what this is about is that... oh boy, this is going to get bigger than I thought. All right, let me not go too far down a rabbit hole here. It is very common. Yeah, no, it's very common for us to think of our brains as monolithic agents, right? Like, who are you? I am my brain, or I am my body, or I am whatever, right? But like, there's only one me there. But I think that model is not actually as good in some contexts as the idea of there are multiple me's in there. There are multiple agents sort of fighting for control. And I don't mean that in any kind of like, dysfunctional way, honestly. I just mean it in the sense of like,
this is what it is to be human.
Yeah, totally. Like, I mean it in the simplest example of like, I want to be healthy and I want to eat the ice cream.
Right.
And like somebody has to win and somebody has to lose, right?
Yep.
And from that perspective, I have I have the direct experience. I have the subjective sense that when I listen to your playlist, there is a part of me that is engaging with the playlist while another part of me engages with the work I'm trying to do. And because the part that's listening is listening, it's out of the way of the work. Like I don't normally perceive that like there's somebody in the way of my getting work done. And yet when I'm listening to the playlist, I have this sense of frictionlessness that conveys to me, oh, somebody in there that's normally in the way is busy doing something else at the moment.
It's like a toddler in your brain and you like hand that toddler a ball and you're like, do whatever you want with this thing. Have a great time. You're going to be locked in this room for a little bit. I'll come back and see you. And the toddler's very happy and doesn't interfere. That's great.
Exactly. I mean, that is my subjective experience when I listen to a good playlist in that way. And so, so then now rather than self-management being programming the computer of my brain, right? Self-management becomes leading the team that is doing whatever it's doing in there. Right. And we both know leading a team, I mean, there's skill there, but like it's messy, right? It's not a science, it's an art and it's messy.
Yeah, it's definitely messy. It's really weird. So I just finished this book, Steppenwolf, today, and it's weird how many like echoes of this book have already happened in our conversation thus far.
Yeah.
The idea of like sort of like the fragmentary nature of human existence. That there are like thousands of selves within there. Yeah, and then taming one of them. This is like, I mean that's an approach for sure. And I think that I don't know. I mean, there's so many. You can approach this from so many different points of view. I mean, I think one. Well,
I'll tell you what. Let's make it our goal in this conversation. To name and maybe briefly describe as many different pieces of this toolkit as we're familiar with. We may not, we're never going to be able to give the expert view on any one of these things. I would think, but I bet we could touch on a number of tools that we found, a number of tools and frameworks we found helpful for ourselves and our students that we could probably go through.
Well, and I think what works for ourselves, what works for me is not always going to be the same as what works for you. And it's definitely not always going to be what works for my students. Everyone has their tool set because they have their own fragmentary personalities, and our personalities absolutely overlap and have things in common, but are never quite exactly the same,
Yeah. But what that means is, right, if you start with somebody else's toolkit, you're going to have a huge leg up on trying to write it from scratch. Because if I listen to your toolkit and I'm like, yeah, that'll work. That doesn't sound like me. That'll work. Oh, I should modify this one. It's like, okay, I've just skipped the first 4 steps of creating this stuff and just gone straight for that.
Yeah, I know. That makes sense to me. I mean, I think the thing I was going to say was that like, and I stop me if this is going to go too far afield.
Right. No.
But like, I think our goals are like, what you're trying to accomplish is the kind of first and foremost, important thing where you'd say, okay, well, my task is to make a book or something like that, but that's a tough example. That's a really tough example too, because there's so many things that go into that, so many different skills and tasks, and so like you wouldn't be able to use one technique, one process to get that done. You need to have a bunch of processes.
Hang on a second. I think you're getting stuck in the early stages here, and maybe I can help there by proposing a tool. I propose that whenever you want to get a thing done, you should estimate or guess at how long it's going to take. And then you should plan to spend the first third of that time thinking about why you want to do it, what it's going to do for you, and what the pieces of it are. In other words, you should spend a third of the time on sort of the meta work. And that includes, okay, what's the example, right? Oh my gosh, I've got to write this essay for tomorrow, right? That is an unpleasant activity according to that frame for most people. I've got to write this thing for tomorrow. There's urgency.
It's not, I can't wait to write this essay. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, totally. Right. So then it's like, okay, well, what do I get if I write this essay? Well, I get the teacher off my back. Okay. That's a start. That's the removal of a negative, but can we be positive about it? Well, I will skill up in essay writing. I will skill up in essay writing in a way that I can't necessarily perceive. Wait a minute, isn't that a negative? Well, no, it's not. If you can perceive it, you can attack it directly. This is a way to get good at a thing that you don't even know how you did it, and yet you know you're going to get the benefit. It's like, oh, this is almost like magic. I'm going to skill up in this way. I get to try some new writing techniques. Maybe I get to I get to test my teacher and see if she recognizes, the thing that I did here in the third paragraph.
Right. Have a conversation with the teacher too. Like, share ideas,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get to not think about anything else for 3 hours. Like I get to not, I get to not clean my room. I get to not have to deal with all the other things. All I have to do is sit here and do this thing. Right. Okay. Well, that's a benefit. I enjoy writing. Okay, great. That'll be nice. There's a meditative quality there for sure. And then it's like, okay, well, what is this going to be? What's the hard part here? Well, I don't really know what I'm writing about. I read the book a month ago. I don't remember it well, and yet I'm supposed to write about it, right? It's like, well, okay, how do we do that? I could skim the book. I could look up Cliff's notes. I could think back. I could look at my notes. Like there are a lot of possible. Once I've identified why this is hard, I can start attacking it. I guess what I'm trying to point out here is that most of the barriers that get in the way of being productive, in my view and in my experience, come down to vague, unexamined anxieties as opposed to actual roadblocks. And if you examine them and say, okay, why is this hard? In most cases, you'll be like, actually, this isn't hard. It's just that I wasn't clearly looking at what needs doing here.
Yeah, I like roadblock as a metaphor, and even to think through that metaphor even a little bit more. Like if you were driving and you were trying to get from A to B and you ran into a roadblock and there was a detour, right? There's a clear solution, and often it'll even be sort of scripted out for you. It's like detour, take a left, and you take a right, then whatever. You work your way back to the original route.
Follow the orange signs,
and it's not hard. Exactly, it's not like there's nothing especially difficult about it. It just takes maybe a little bit more time. But the thing that people get hung up on is the fact that they can't take the original route, the fact that it's going to take a little bit longer or whatever. You know what I mean? Like the path is clear. It's just our feelings about taking this longer path that can get in the way, and the feelings are the things that hang people up. You know what I mean? That prevent them from doing the thing that they ought to be doing.
I would say expectation more than feeling. I have planned to take this route. Right, I have anticipated what it will be. I have pre-felt the feelings that are, you know what I mean? And now I've got to deal with change in the moment. Right? Oh my gosh, I'm going to get there late, or I'm going to have to take a turn I didn't expect. Yep. It's like, well, again, framing, right? Like this can be a complete catastrophe, or this can be an opportunity for a 5-minute adventure. Either way, you're going to take the detour. So like, why get hung up about it, right?
Yeah. Well, let's get into some of the tools. You know what I mean? Let's get into some of our
already. No, that's all good.
Yeah. I've got one lined up, but I think
sure,
okay. I like to use competition.
With other people, with yourself, or have I missed something? Ooh.
Both. It's definitely helpful with other people. I definitely, I'm a person who likes to kind of like see my experience through other people's eyes, or have it be seen. You know what I mean? Like and I think a lot of people are like this way, but sure. Having a gym teacher, for instance, who's watching my progress and who, compliments or critiques my form, makes me better at my form, yeah, I mean, this is not competition specifically, but I've noticed recently, I do this gym class and I do it at my house, and almost all the stuff I do, it's on Zoom and it's live. Almost all of it is in front of the camera. There's one move that I can't do in front of the camera because it's like stripping, and you have to use a roller on a wall. This is such a stupid story. Anyway, I have to be off camera for it, is the point.
Yeah, okay, fine.
So when I do it, I notice that my form gets really, really weak and bad because I know I won't be seen, So basically, this is totally actually separate, and I need to figure out how to label that, name that motivating factor, and that one's not even really process, but
it's totally process, and here's why.
Process.
I totally do. Here's the thing, right? What you're illustrating is that you're not getting benefit from the coach directly. You're getting benefit from your observation that the coach is observing you.
Yes.
And what that means is that if you could convince yourself that the coach was watching you, your form would improve, independent of the input you're actually getting from another human.
Right. Right.
Okay, in creative problem solving, this is a well-known technique. This is a well-known property.
Oh, wow,
that leads
really?
to a technique. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. And the way it goes in problem solving is, let's say that I'm stuck on some problem. I can't figure out a way to solve this conundrum. Okay, so you're probably going to be unsurprised to hear that one of the things that I could do is I could call up my buddy Ted and I could say, "Hey Ted, I'm having trouble with this problem." And if you just sort of listen actively, you can help me solve, because you'll say, well, you know, what's the nature of the problem, Wes? And I'll say, oh, well, there's this terrible, difficult thing and I can't work out the blah, 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 blah. And you might say, well, what does that mean? Right? Oh, well, it means this other thing here. Oh, well, and then what did you try? Oh, I tried oh, Ted, I just figured it out. Right? You've experienced that from both sides, I'm sure, many, many times, right?
Yeah.
You haven't, in some sense, you haven't contributed anything to the conversation, and yet you have, right? Because what you're doing is you're giving me the feeling that someone else is helping, even if you're not helping yourself. And so the technique I'm referring to is called rubber ducking, because it turns out that if you explain what you're doing to anyone, even if the anyone else is a rubber duck, you will be benefited, because you are forcing yourself to just walk through the process that you've done in a way that you'd explain it to another person, or in this case, you know, bath toy.
That's fascinating. I just made a note of that, not for like podcast purposes, but just for my own purposes. Just to,
no, it's totally true.
You know, retain that.
Yeah. I'm stuck on this thing. Explain it to a rubber duck, and that will help a shocking percentage of the time.
That's great.
High.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's like, you know, with the goal of like clarity in mind.
Yeah,
know?
Totally. There's a buddy of mine who says, "How can I know what I think before I hear what I've said?"
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like he's, you know, talking through it as part of the process.
Yeah, I'm working with a student on her college essays. Now we just wrapped about an hour ago, and I don't ask that question directly because like it's December 30th and like it's, you know, the deadline is tomorrow. Yeah, and everything's going to be fine. But there are many times when I'm trying to get at that idea of like, what is it you're really trying to say here? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like we have to start with that. We have to know that first.
Yeah.
Back to the competition thing.
Sure.
That's one that just, it works for me. It doesn't, and I don't even have to win. I just need to be competing.
Okay.
And part of that is the same where, I mean, you know, I'm being seen by somebody else. I'm like in the sort of like public arena. When I'm sitting by myself and no one's watching and no one cares, very likely nothing's going to get done. That's just how it works for me, which is weird.
Is it weird? It doesn't seem weird.
I wouldn't say it's weird, but it's not like everybody else anyway. You know, my husband writes books, right? So he writes fiction books, and he's writing them. He wants to publish them, but while he's writing them, he's all by himself. He's in, you know, this room, and he just does his thing. And I can write too. And actually, that's a bad example because I can write too, but he's just really good at like carving out that time and making use of, you know, 4 to 8 hours a day of him just pounding away on the keyboard. So I think it's that's very sort of like self-oriented and like individually motivated. Yeah.
I have a buddy who's a successful illustrator who seems to work in the same way, right? He's at his desk, and if he's at his desk for 3 hours, 3 hours worth of stuff gets done. At least that's my sense of it from the outside. And so that to me feels more like the computer program analogy. It's like you have 3 hours, you got 3 hours done. Whereas what we were talking about before is I've got 3 hours. How can I arrange to get close to 3 hours worth of work done here? So we're talking about two different, I don't want to say two different kinds of people, because I don't think it's just that these people are different. I think it's that, you know, for any given person, for any given moment in time, for any given task you want to accomplish, it can feel like it's no big deal to just crank it out, and it can feel like you're pushing a brick uphill.
Yes, and you can feel the same way about the same task. You know what I mean? That's the part I think we should be talking about. The fact that you can turn the uphill brick into, you know, the ice hockey coast across the field. Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
And then, okay, how do you do that? And there are a bunch of ways to do it. My business of taking some time beforehand to really think through, okay, why am I doing this thing? What is it going to be? And so on, helps to clear away the obstacles and helps to give you clarity on like, why am I doing this thing? In other words, I'm not writing an essay, I'm improving my grade. I'm not writing an essay, I'm improving my writing. I'm not writing an essay, I'm getting into college. I'm not writing an essay, I'm practicing my future career. Like there are a lot of frames for this stuff. And fundamentally, like the big, like the label on the bucket that all of these things fit into is lying to yourself. Like fundamentally, right? I mean, I say it tongue in cheek.
Well, telling stories at least. Yeah. I get
sure.
Yeah.
I don't mean it lying in a malicious way. I think telling stories is a good way to putting it. But bottom line is framing really matters, right? There's a part of your brain that can make up stories. There are parts of your brain that can only take in stories. They can't interpret. They need an interpretation handed to them. So give them one that will serve your purpose. Right? I'm in the middle of my future career, laying the groundwork. Okay, I could get behind that as opposed to, oh my God, I have to get this done by 10 o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
No, I mean, if you ever are befuddled by anyone else's behavior, just ask yourself, what story are they telling themselves? You know,
That's
like,
right.
why do they believe, what could possibly lead them to think this way? And
Right.
once you find that answer, you'll be satisfied that you understand why they're doing some sort of crazy behavior. It won't be any less frustrating necessarily, but you'll get why.
Well, you might learn something about a worldview that hadn't occurred to you before, or at least that
That's
you don't
true.
take in the same way. The way I heard it is the great tragedy in life is that everybody has their reasons. But it's the same, it's kind of a darker spin on the same thing, but it's like they're not doing it to be crazy. They're not doing it to be incompetent. They're not doing it to be malicious in most cases anyway. They're doing it because they think it's the right thing to do and you disagree and there you go.
Everybody has their reasons. So like the California DMV is, takes forever and is a completely like ass backwards organization because the people who work there, they still have their reasons for, working sort of as slowly as they do. The system has basically created those. And the best way for them to kind of get through their day is to work the way that they do, which is to basically like, live in a maze of cubicles and, only come out as infrequently as they possibly can.
I haven't been to the DMV in a while, but since you're talking about sort of the movie Brazil or any any sort
Exactly.
of right, I think there's something to be said for the idea of, look, it causes very severe negative consequences if we afford someone the license to drive a motor vehicle and they are not qualified to do so. Right. So based on that, right, and there's a bunch of laws that go with that and all this kind of stuff. So it's very important that our records be up to date and correct and
that
whatever,
goal is
right?
so far removed from whatever motivates the people at the DMV to work the way that they work. But yes,
Well, what I'm going to suggest here is that like if it really is the sort of the ground truth that look, you got to get this right, then there's probably going to be some systems in there that that increase accuracy, probably at the cost of making it easy or fun or whatever. Right. And you can imagine going through a couple layers of this and getting to a point where getting this done accurately is more important than getting it done quickly. We've made that clear to you, right? We've put a lot of incentives in place such that is the case. And perhaps for other reasons, our goal is to make sure that we have a relatively low turnover here because we know that new people make more mistakes. So what we're doing is we're setting up a situation in which as long as you continue to do things accurately, everything goes well for you. Well, what are you going to do in that circumstance? You're going to make darn sure that things go accurately. You're not going to try and rush. That's counterproductive. And you're not going to try and get home at the end of the day and feel drained. You're going to try and get home at the end of the day and feel like, okay, that wasn't too bad for me. And if that means I'm going to handle half as many applications so that I can do everything without being, completely drained, then that's what I'm going to do. And if the way I work that out is to have running conversations with my coworkers or what,
I mean, I think your read on the DMV is
I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about the DMV in specific. I'm just saying that there are a lot of unintended consequences that can happen, due to the design of a system. And
yes.
I'm saying this because your brain is a system, right? It's an incredibly complicated system. And I'm not making the claim that it was designed per se, but I am saying that like there's a bunch of stuff that happens because parts of your brain think it's a good idea. I mean, think about how many anxieties, there are all kinds of sort of mental maladies, right? But I'll just focus in on anxiety. How much anxiety do I feel over the course of a day, right? It's easy for me to say, oh, geez, I feel like subjectively kind of a lot, right? My personality lends itself to getting worried about stuff. Is that a productive use of my mental energy? Well, sometimes it's like, you know what, there's no sense being anxious about that. But sometimes it's like, oh, right, I'm worried about the situation because the last time I experienced a situation like this, it ended badly for me. And this is, there's some agent, there's some part of my brain that wants to steer me away from a bad outcome here. Right. I think there's enormous value in being able to say, thank you, part of my brain. I appreciate the alert. I got the message. You can stand down now. I've got this. We're good.
Well, okay, a couple thoughts. So one is, I think I've shared this before, but this is like one of my favorite sort of sayings and truisms of life is every system is perfectly engineered to produce the result that it produces, right? So like the DMV, like everything that happens at the DMV is like according to the script. They nail it every time. Further to the DMV and back to process, like there's a best way to handle the DMV. That best way. And this is, I'm using this as an example, right? So like, please believe me, folks, I'm not that hung up on the DMV. I actually don't really care that much. I do almost all my business by mail, which is great. I had one experience in person that I could talk about that like informs this whole thing. But the process is get an appointment, make the appointment be the first appointment in the day, and get there a little bit early, and it's going to work out just fine, and you'll be in and out. But my point about that is that the DMV, the system, and the human mind, and God, that's a terrible comparison to make. I hate to like draw that parallel.
We'll see when you're done. This could be good. Go.
I so hope that my brain is not the DMV, the one that's in downtown LA. There's one, if you know it, it's near USC.
Okay.
And there are people who are nodding their heads right now. That like, there are ways of working around a system that is challenging, right? And the human mind is challenging. My brain's challenging, and it's like I know there are certain times of day when I'm more creative, when I'm better at mundane work, when I'm better at brainstorming, and I need to sort of pick those times, carve those times out and spend those times doing those activities.
Yeah.
But that's just that's another process, right? It's basically like timing, efficiency based on timing. I'm just losing my train of thought here, but no, just the idea that like you can't fix the system, so work within the system in the best way possible, right? That is that process. I mean, that's what it feels like to me right now.
I think that you bring a lot of expectation into the conversation when you use the word fix. I can't fix the system, so I'll work with it. Who's to say that working with it isn't the optimum solution? That would be the very definition of fixing it, wouldn't it? And indeed, It would be an indication that it's not broken in the first place. It's just that the system you want and the system you have aren't the same systems. It's like, well, wishing you had a better system isn't going to get you very far. Acknowledging what system you have and playing it to the best of your ability is. No violin is perfect, but a good violinist can make it sound good.
And that goes back to the start of the conversation, which is like, what is your goal? You know what I mean? Like, if you're a good violinist, what your goal is to play, Prokofiev or Mozart or whoever you want to play and play it beautifully.
Sure.
But you have to have that first, you know what I mean? Because then that's the point of orientation from which you say, okay, great. How can I make the system work to help accomplish that goal?
Well, and what that raises for me, right, is that we're talking about process and we're sort of implicitly talking about productivity. One of the things we haven't talked about is, okay, am I optimizing for productivity? Am I optimizing for joy? Am I optimizing for satisfaction, which is different? Like, okay, we're in this conversation, we're optimizing for productivity, but it's worth pointing out, right, that if you can't identify the overlap between productivity and enjoyment, then you are in for a world of hurt. And it's like your willpower will run out eventually, right? Much better to arrange for the thing you're doing to be something you enjoy, whether it's because you've picked a career that you enjoy or whether it's because you're lying to yourself about what you're accomplishing in this moment, or, sort of in the middle of the spectrum, right? You're telling yourself the story that is defensibly true to yourself and yet is a sort of a more positive spin, right? I'm building a skill that I know I want to have and I'm enjoying the process, as opposed to I have to get it done.
I would rather deceive myself about the process and how to get it done than deceive myself about the nature of the task that I'm trying to accomplish. You know what I mean? So like this
Sure.
is
Okay.
kind of like existential in a way, but it's like I'd rather have the goal be something that I'm like can stand behind without a lot of doubt. And even, you know, over the course of a day, your attitudes will change. But
There are layers of deception. Like you've written plenty of books.
right.
Have you ever written a book for 1,000 people? And have you ever written a book for no one but yourself?
Yes to the first, thousands, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then I think no to the second. I mean, I've written stuff for myself. I've written some stuff for myself. Yeah.
When I wrote the book that I wrote a couple of years ago, right? There were times and it was like, yeah, I want to write this for as many people, you know, blah, blah, blah. But there were times that I just got stuck where it was like, you know what? I'm just going to write this and I'm going to be the only audience here. And I'm going to write what I want to read and we'll see how that goes. And there were a couple of junctures at which that unstuck me because I realized I was so in my head about like what people might want to read. And it's like, well, let me just start with what I want to read. And then if it's trash, I'll edit it, you know? And in some cases it was like, yeah.
But I think you agree with me because I think that it's like you're saying that the ultimate goal is one you can stand behind. You know what I mean? It's like, I want to write a book that I would want to read.
Oh, I see.
And so, you know, I would say that there are a lot of people who work in professions, and this is definitely not true of everybody, but there's lots of jobs out there that people don't really want to do necessarily.
Yeah.
And I think that you need to be kind of like honest about what your goals are and aims are in order to like tolerate or even enjoy that job, you know? And so what I'm saying is if my goal is to, you know, write books that people will like so that people will buy the books and I can kind of basically take what I know and share it with people, you know, on a sort of like a multiplicative scale, then I don't mind putting the time into, you know, picking a typeface and setting math equations, which takes forever, by the way. You know, like that's weeks off of my life. And that process is not the most fun thing for me, but it's in, you know, it's serving a goal that I do love. You know what I mean? So like, so what I'm saying about my point about process is that at times it's like, yeah, it is deception. It is trickery. But I don't mind that trickery. And I think that like, as long as it's serving the goal that you actually want to accomplish. And that's the, you know, starting point again for me. It's like, again, what's your aim? I want to be a great violinist. Why? Okay. Because my mother wasn't a great violinist and she wanted her child to be so that she could fulfill her own, you know, dreams vicariously. It's like, oh, that's a garbage reason for me to do it. You know, because I think music is this, you know, essence of the human soul, and I want to express it in the way that is singular to me. Oh,
you know, when you were talking about the first reason, I was like, yeah, I could see how that could be okay. And then you got to the second reason, I'm like, oh yeah, the first reason was crap.
The first one's a lot more common than the second one, I think.
Yeah,
you know?
I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
And
anyway,
it's easy.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, I just think I know we're talking about process. We still are, but like I think I'm veering out to these other ideas that like almost are like the justification for process. You know,
well, I mean, if you don't know why you're doing the thing, then how can you understand the thing? It makes sense to me that this would be a wide-ranging conversation because, again, if we were all just computers programming ourselves to do stuff in the future, we wouldn't need this conversation because it would be obvious how to get things done. You decide to get them done. You decide what the thing you want to have done is, and then it would be done the next day. And it's just not our experience, you know?
Do you also think that like, is it worth kind of judging the nature of the process tool, or do we just leave that totally aside? You know what I mean?
I don't understand. Say more.
Like, well,
do you have an example in mind?
Yeah, I do. I just came up with one, but it's like grotesque, so I'm not going to use it.
Now I'm really curious.
I mean, like, you know, suppose you were like, you know, the only thing that motivated you was like, you know, cruelty to other humans, you know.
Oh, all right.
Then like, well, that's a problem. You know, that's like that's not that's a motivational technique that or process that affects other people negatively.
I mean, that depends. Are you the showrunner for Dexter? In that case, it might be that might work out great for you.
You know, basically like my competition tool is a much tamer one to think about. Yeah, right. Okay. Like, why do I need competition to motivate me? I don't. You know, it's not the only thing that can work, but it does work. And so I don't sweat it. You know what I mean? Like I try to set it up. I try to establish competition where it'll work, and it's harder to do than you might think. But once I do, it motivates me like with no problem whatsoever. But do we need to assess that, like the value, the quality of the tool itself, the process tool itself?
Yeah, we do, particularly because, okay, I can imagine that there are some people who are listening to this who are saying, gosh, these guys are just talking, or at least Wes, but I think both of us are talking about manipulating ourselves into doing other things. Why don't you just be authentically in the world and do what the world suggests you should be doing from moment to moment? And I think those people have a point, right?
I agree, but yeah, I don't find any problem with what we're doing. Yeah, like I get that objection, but I also understand why we're going about it this way. But carry on.
Yeah, no, I think we're on the same page as far as that goes. I guess what I'm trying to point out is it is helpful to understand the various processes by which you, for lack of a better word, manipulate yourself, guide yourself into doing certain things. Like we all have techniques for doing stuff that we know we don't want to do. Well, okay, here's the classic problem, right?
Okay.
I don't want to do it, whatever it is. I don't want to do it, but I want it done.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay. And I can't delegate it. I can't defer it. Like I want it done. I just don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Like to me, this is one of the essence bits of being human, right? Is that we can project forward into the future. We can see the thing done and we can use that as a motivator to get through the unpleasantness of actually doing the thing. Right. So I think it really makes sense to talk about our process here because we're talking about manipulating ourselves, and like you can use the power for good or evil, right? Like you can manipulate yourself into, like you can think forward to how good it's going to feel to have the thing done. And you can use that as a motivation to do the thing in the moment. And then you can feel good about it. And then you can have the double sort of dopamine hit, feel good of, you know what? I just got through that barrier. I got myself to do an unpleasant thing in the service of a world I'd prefer to live in. And now I live in that better world because the thing is done.
Yep. Yep.
Right.
Sorry, real quick. My example for that is, and with the exact same thinking in mind is I always make the bed. First thing in the morning, I make the bed. And it's not because, I mean, it's because I want the bed made, but it's even more than that. It's basically demonstrating to myself in the morning, hey, you can do something that you don't want to do and accomplish a result that you want to accomplish. And hey, brain, isn't that a great, moral tale for the rest of the day?
Did you get that from the U.S. Marines, or is that just coincidence?
No, that's interesting. No, I think I got it from my therapist.
Really? Yeah, might have gotten it from the Marines. I've only heard that associated with the military, but totally, 100% agree. Right? Like you're setting in motion the first of a series of events that is you doing a thing that gets you into a better position, and the only pleasantness in the middle of it is thinking forward to how it's going to feel when you're done. And yet again, the people I was referring to before who might have an objection, I think would probably rightly say, or you could be in the moment and you could enjoy the feeling of the soft duvet cover and the satisfying snap as you fluff the sheet or like whatever, right? Like, I think there's also benefit in like, okay, be here now and do the thing. And what we're really pointing out here is that again, right? Managing your own mind it's messy, right? Sometimes you're going to be in the moment and like, oh, I've got, a cup of coffee next to me and it's a nice quiet room and the sunlight's coming in and I'm going to enjoy making the bed. Sometimes it's like, you know what? I'm going to just kind of, white knuckle is too strong, but like, I'm going to do this thing that I don't really want to get done. And then the bed's going to be made and I'm going to feel good. And then off we go to, meet the next challenge. I think there's something to be said for the idea that if you're framing everything as a challenge for yourself, probably something is wrong. And yet, if you're completely in the moment and everything is just super easy, maybe you've ascended to guru status, or, maybe you need to put a little more sand in your oyster and have some more challenge and some more personal growth. I don't know. Maybe I've just upset some people by suggesting that. But for myself, I feel like there's a balance to be had.
That's a great question. I mean, that's a tough question. I mean, I think I don't see everything as a challenge. You know what I mean? It's like I'm, playing, say, fantasy football that ended this week. It's like,
did you win?
Decisions to make. I won the points title. So, which to me is like, that's kind of bragging rights. I finished third overall, but
nice. Out of 17 people,
12.
Wow. Okay. So third out of 12.
I
like it.
Well, crushed in the quarterfinals, crushed in the alternate finals, lost in the semifinals.
Got it. And forgive me for asking, but like, this is like a sports thing, so I know nothing about it. There is skill involved here. Is this totally a luck thing, or like, what's the?
Yeah, it's both. It's definitely both, and it's like there are people who are really good at it. It's kind of an interesting topic. The people who are really good at it are like you want to have some insight and knowledge that other people don't have, but also you just want to play matchups. Basically, you just want to like look and say, okay, this is what happened last week to this team, with a player of this style. Now my player is going to go up against that same team and they gave up this many yards or whatever. Basically, like you're optimizing the probabilities of your expectations. You know what I mean? And you can't nail it, but the more you do that, the more you optimize those probabilities, then basically like you're just creating a mathematical advantage for yourself across the board.
That's so funny because like I know next to nothing about sports. I know nothing about fantasy football, but what you've just described is how I run my life on good days anyway.
Yeah. Interesting.
I'm just making bets all day long. If I do this thing, like, am I guaranteed it's going to work out well? No, of course not. But like on balance, right? This is a good use of my effort. Go.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is for me too. I mean, well, okay. One random last over self-share. And then I want to ask you about tools for your own process tools. Cause I'm genuinely curious.
Okay.
Now with me in terms of like those probability decisions, I think I tend to be fairly conservative with my decision-making. Okay. And basically I wait for probabilities of say 95% or higher, and then I act. You know what I mean? Oh. Like I'm not an 80% guy. I'm not this will probably work. I can have fun with that sometimes, but not under less sort of like serious conditions. Any serious decision I'm making, I'm waiting until there's 95% certainty and then acting, and then reaping a good result 19 times out of 20.
That's interesting. I'm an 80% guy. I mean, I think. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of opportunity to lie to yourself there and not realize it, but I think I'm more of an 80% guy. It seems like a good bet. Great, take it.
I think 80% is more productive probably because you say yes more often.
Well, yeah, and then the problem is you've got a list of things to do as long as your arm, and then you got to be careful.
So talk about your process. Yeah, what do you do?
Okay, so one of my secret weapons, and I only apply this. So first of all, right, if I list through all the things that I do, I'm going to come across like this super productive, awesome, whatever. And I need to start by caveating by saying, like, here's the stuff that I do on my good days, right? On my good days, I'm aware of these tools. I use these tools and so on. And like any other human, I have bad days where it's like I completely forget the good thing that I remembered to do last week and I'm just kind of in a funk or whatever. But be that as it may. One of the biggest tools I have discovered is set the bar improbably low. Okay. I spent my entire adolescence or, child, secondary education, whatever, aiming high, right? Trying to do the hard thing. And I just got done, lecturing us about sand in the oyster and how important it is to have challenge and all that kind of good stuff. And yet I'm not backing down from that. I think challenge is good. And yet I also think that there are circumstances in which we just set the bar too damn high for ourselves. So the great example is like, I've got a list of 20 things that are supposed to get done, right? A classic thing that I would do, and I imagine many listeners would do, would be like, well, you know what, I'm going to get these done today, and then I get 10 of them done, and it's like, well, I only got half done. Well, all right, better luck next time, right? Or I'll look at the 20 and I'll get 3 of them done, and it'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe I just got 17 for tomorrow, that kind of thing. But on a good day, I'll look at the list of 20 and I'll say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pick the one here that's going to be most important. Am I sure this one is most important? No, but it's a good bet. Okay, great. I'm going to aim to start that one. And once I've started, I put the big green checkbox on the piece of paper or whatever. And anything that happens beyond that point is a bonus. The gym door rule, right?
Right.
I do not like going to the gym, but I like having been to the gym. So how do I do it? If I show up at the gym holding my gym bag and touch the front door of the gym, I get credit for going to the gym on that day. Like that's the hard part. And once I'm there, anything that happens beyond that is bonus. If I actually work out, if I actually get on the exercise bike or whatever, that doesn't count. What counted is I showed up with my gym bag. A great example of this is Quora, Quora.com. Are you familiar with Quora?
Quora.
Quora. Yeah, it's a question and answer site.
Right.
People ask a bunch of questions and then people, write their expert, whatever. And you're reading this and you're like, wow, there's a signal to noise ratio, but like some of these answers, you read them and you're like, wow, that's really thoughtful. I really got a lot out of that. Right. Well, you dig into Quora and what you discover about their business model. I'm tempted to kind of ask you what you think it is, but I'll just tell you straight up. They pay people to ask questions.
Okay.
They don't pay people to write answers. because
Okay.
they know that if somebody's wrong on the internet, just like, hordes of experts will descend on it and try to correct it because that's in our nature. They're not even particularly, they're not even giving bounty for particularly good questions necessarily. It's just they know that if they seed the internet with a bunch of questions, that some number of people who know what they're talking about will jump on them and answer them.
Are the responses always, they're always sort of like conversational, right? So like you have the question at the top and then you'll have probably like a dozen responses underneath and they'll kind of pick the one that's the best and put that to the top. Is that right? Based on notes? Yeah. That's a good model. That makes perfect sense to me. Yeah. That was not the model I was going to guess at, but.
Yeah. But it's just like, it seems backwards to me, right? Like, well, of course you're going to pay the experts to blah, 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 but it's like, no, the experts are going to do it for free, But anyway, the business that to me that relates to the idea of setting the bar low. It's not get a bunch of awesome questions. It's just get a bunch of questions out there and trust that something good will happen as a result. Right. Yeah. Another really good one is to recognize how much a lot of hay is made around like, well, how much are you responsible for your own success? And there's the question of like, oh, I'm a self-made person versus, oh yeah, but there's all these systems that helped you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not even going to get into that debate, but I am going to get into a parallel question, which is not how much are you responsible for your own success, but rather how much are your decisions responsible for your actions in a given day?
Okay.
Because I think that some people have the unexamined belief that, well, of course, all of my actions are the result of my decisions. Who else would it be? Right? Mm-hmm. It's like I decided to make coffee in the morning. I decided to walk the dog. Like everything I do is a decision to which my response is, yeah, no, BS. It certainly is not. So much of what you do is habit. We are like our brains, right? Use 20 watts of power, right? They're incredibly efficient. How do they do that? They're incredibly lazy. Like anytime the brain has an opportunity to delegate something to some lower level system, it does. And the way that looks is that you run on habits. Like if you want to have a different day, don't exercise willpower against your habits. Exercise your willpower to build a new habit that you will keep for the rest of your life that will shift you in the direction of the place you want to be.
And I would even say see your habits as decisions. Do you know what I mean? Like they're not like active decisions that you're making on a day-to-day basis. And people get into a bad habit of eating fast food every day for lunch or something like that. Sure. But like you are making that decision. You are getting yourself to that place, and you can change that. Because if you don't see it as like some act of willpower, it does become like fixed, right?
Okay, well, let me frame it this way: if my thing is that I eat fast food and that's my habit, and I want to change that habit. First of all, let's just recognize that the decision to have fast food was mostly made by my past self, right? At some point in the past, I took actions that led to the establishment of this habit.
Yeah.
So if somebody's responsible for that decision, it's me, but it's past me.
Right.
And
and it could even be sort of like advertising, you know what I mean? Or,
I'm not saying I made it in a vacuum. Yeah, totally. But like one way or the other, right? Okay, fine. If you insist that the decision was yours, you have to at least give me that, past you makes some decisions for present you in the same way that present you gets to make decisions for future you. Right. If I'm like, and that's part of where it goes wrong, right? Is that, oh, I'm going to put all my willpower into not eating fast food today. It's like, okay, you're setting yourself up to have that fight every day. Or you could frame it as the actions I'm going to take today are going to change whether me of a month from now eats fast food. Much more powerful frame for my money in most circumstances. It's not about getting it done today. It's about laying the groundwork for establishing a new pattern that you can hang on to indefinitely.
Yeah, that's great. I like that a lot. Yeah.
And so a lot of my in big air quotes, productivity work, right, looks completely superfluous, looks completely just like, how is this helping you? Because what I'm really trying to do is to understand, okay, why is this habit in play? What would the new habit look like? What can I expect to get? How difficult do I expect it to be? What are some of the steps that I need to take in order to establish it? And it's like, yeah, but what did you get done today? Well, nothing, except that tomorrow my actions are going to be a little different in a way that today seems like it will be better. And by applying that kind of thinking, again, this is something I can only do on a good day, but when I apply that thinking, It's like the actions I'm taking today are setting the stage to make it easy to do the right things tomorrow. And so it's not about, oh, I'm going to exercise this willpower and finish this chapter today. It's, I'm going to clean my office because I know that's going to make it easier for me to finish the chapter tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. And I work best at the clean desk. Exactly.
There you go.
Yeah.
You know.
I was going to say how, going back to your first point that so much of this is about, I mean, all the points we've made so far, but so much of this is about psychology, just basically like, not necessarily working against, but working with and understanding our own psychology,
Yeah.
So, like my to-do list example to kind of parallel to yours is that I will make a list on Monday. And when I first write the list, I'll look at it and say like, when I get all of this done, this will be like one really good day's worth of work. You know what I mean? I'll be so proud. And then I finish that list by the end of the week, and it almost always works that way. I get to the end of Monday and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe how many things are left on this. But I've learned that that's always going to happen. And so my Monday list essentially is my week-long list, And so like I basically have just told myself, oh yeah, get as much as you can done on Monday because Monday's always a good day. Get the next most amount done on Tuesday because that's always my second best day, And eventually you'll get through this whole list. And that list that was an ambitious list for Monday turns into like a pretty decently accomplished list for an entire week, But that's just pure psychology. You know what I mean? That's pure like, there's two ways of interpreting not getting it done on Monday. One is you failed, the other is, oh yeah, this is the natural step in the process of getting all this stuff done.
So let me ask you this, since this is all psychology, how would this exercise play out differently for you if on Monday you showed up to write the list and you told yourself that this is the weekly list rather than the Monday list?
Yeah, I should try it. I should find out, I don't know. I think, it's never occurred to me to do it that way. I think it would be different. I think my response would be different. I think that I might even, I don't know. Maybe I'd go faster. Maybe I'd go slower. I don't know.
I suspect it would be worse. And I'm just riffing on what you said earlier, which is that every system is optimized to do what it does. Yeah. Like if you frame it this way, there's probably some benefit you're getting from it. But I think it would be interesting to mix it up and to see how it goes wrong, or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it would go better. Who knows?
I always got my papers done in college, and I always got them done on time, but like almost always in the nick of time. You know what I mean? With like, somewhere in the range of, 45 to 1 minute to spare. You know what I mean?
Well, urgency is a powerful motivator. You know about the Pomodoro technique, I think it's called?
Yeah. It's 20. Is it 20 minutes?
20 minutes. Yeah. Yeah. You set a 20-minute timer and then you get, X done in 20 minutes. But the point is you're always 20 minutes away from the deadline. And that's really motivating for a lot of people. I think me included. Yeah. That's
the 2-hour podcast or 2-hour playlist as well. You know
Same
what I mean?
idea.
Basically, it's this is, I have this one like beef with our education system that I have to share that is related to this.
Beef with our education system.
Like,
yeah. Okay.
Our goal should be imperfection. Okay. This is it. No, one among many, but like this is a sneaky one. I have a major problem with the deification of people like Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King Jr. because those people are remarkable and very important people in American history, but to deify them makes them inhuman and inaccessible, right?
In other words, I'm not Abraham Lincoln, and therefore I could never be Abraham Lincoln. I could never do.
I can tell you right now, you're never going to be Abraham Lincoln. I can tell you with mathematical certainty, you know what I mean? Like basically, like to a degree where I could say, no, it is actually impossible,
He's exactly. He's already been. And
there was only one civil war and you can't be there. Sorry. And Martin Luther King Jr. is a more like, maybe even a more interesting example because, he was part of a movement that was much bigger than him, but as soon as you elevate that one person to the top, you've now set this sort of like unrealistic standard for what people can be, it's like, oh, you should set as your goal to be Martin Luther King Jr. That's too much. It's not a realistic goal. Cause again, there aren't enough job openings basically for that person, but you can do a lot of work without being Martin Luther King Jr. You know what I mean? Like, so we shouldn't set him as the prime example. We should have other, people who of like a more realistic stature, like people in your community who do great work that you could say, oh yeah, like I want to be like that person and make 3 people's lives better rather than, 100 millions.
So it sounds like you're arguing for a version of setting the bar low, or at least not setting it impossibly high, right?
Exactly.
Don't try to be a hero to 10 million people. Try to be a hero to one person.
Yes, exactly.
Totally agree with that.
Set the impossible goal and miss it every time.
But there's a completely separate interpretation there that would lead me to a different conclusion. I'll throw that out there as well.
Okay.
Which is there's this. So imagine a Venn diagram, right? We've got a couple of overlapping circles here, and there's the stuff you like to do and the stuff you do well, and recognizing those aren't necessarily the same. There's overlap, but they're not necessarily the same. But then where it gets interesting is you take the stuff that you like to do, the stuff you do well, then you overlap the circle of stuff that other people want done.
Right.
It's the center of those three,
and that
where it's like that.
Test prep.
Test prep?
For me.
How do you mean? I see.
I like it. I'm good at it, and other people need it done.
Yeah. All right. I see what you mean. Yeah. I was going to say the center of that thing, like there's a good career in the center of that Venn diagram, whoever you may be, and you're just proving the point, right? And I guess what I'm saying is that to take Martin Luther King, right? He was the right guy at the right time, and all that kind of a lot of stuff lined up. All I'm trying to say is that if you look around at your neighborhood, at the world, whatever, you may find that, okay, I can't be Martin Luther King Jr., for many reasons, not least of which is that I'm not in that time, but I am in this time, and this time also has certain needs. This time also has certain movements that are underway. This time also has certain change that's on the cusp of being made, if only there's a catalyst. Mm-hmm. And I think oftentimes we're so focused on what do I want, what can I do, what gives me joy, that we sort of underweight what needs to get done in the world. I think this is part of why having a service-oriented mindset of giving to the world can be especially powerful, not just because psychologically, it's super, there's just a lot of good feelings involved in, helping other people for sure. But there's also this sense of the service-oriented people tend to have a little bit better view on what needs doing. Right. And as a result, their Venn diagram is just more effective because they have a clearer sense of what needs to get done.
God, there's so many. Yeah, this is a really good conversation, and it can go even deeper and in other directions from there.
But would you say it's excellent though? That's the question.
Well, I for one would say it's an excellent conversation.
Outstanding, good enough. It's in the title.
Yeah, but I wrote the title. I think it was your title.
Was it? I don't even remember.
I think it was yours. All
right. We got to give credit to Warner Brothers, whoever owns the. You know what? I won't even mention it for fear that Will gets in trouble in some way. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
He's Wes Carroll. He's on the web at wescarroll.com. 2 R's, 2 L's.
Thank you very kindly. And he is Tutor Ted, TUTORTED.com. You can recognize him by his wonderful frizzy hair, at least the frizzy hair of his logo. And when you need to truly excel at the SAT and the ACT, he is the guy that you should call.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Wes.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that.
Thanks for hanging with us. Click subscribe, ring the bell, tell a friend, leave a comment. You know the drill.